All right, so I'm going to show you guys an interesting interview, which actually turned out to be more of a debate than anything else, between Jake Tapper and Mayor Pete. Jake Tapper actually does a decent job for once in his life pressing Mayor Pete on Democrats and Republicans, by the way, stabbing rail workers in the back and basically breaking their strike. Okay, so let's start with this, though. This is in the lever. They say senators help donors derail paid sick days. The rejected proposal to provide rail workers sick leave would have cost railroad barons just 4 days' worth of their recent profits, according to financial records. Holy shit. Holy shit. They say the U.S. Senate voted Thursday to deny 125,000 rail workers a handful of paid sick days that would have cost the equivalent of just 4 days of recent profits made by senators' railroad industry donors, according to financial records reviewed by The Lever. The cost of paid sick days for this year, roughly $321 million, would be less than half the amount that a single railroad tycoon, Warren Buffett, funneled to his family foundations last week. Wow. Buffett's railroad firm, BNSF, scored a huge win when 43 senators blocked paid sick leave for exhausted railroad workers and passed legislation preventing workers from striking. The Senate vote followed the Biden White House effectively pouring cold water on efforts to tie paid sick leave to the bill shutting down the rail strike, declaring in a press briefing that the president does not support any bill or amendment that will delay a bill that's getting to his desk by Saturday. Rail workers were asking for the same amount of paid sick days that Biden in 2020 promised he would grant to all workers in America if he was elected president. Biden has not committed to signing an executive order requiring railroads and other government contractors to provide paid sick days. All right, so let me pause here for a second and tell you guys this. What David Schroeder points out, and this didn't even occur to me, but he's right, is that Biden actually has the ability, he doesn't even need to do it through legislation that goes through Congress. He could sign an executive order requiring railroads and other government contractors to provide paid sick days, and however many that he wants them to provide. Because if it's a government contractor, he, as the head of the executive branch, has authority over these government contractors. So he doesn't even need to do it through Congress. He can do it himself, and he has chosen not to do it. It's incredible. $7 billion of profit in 90 days. While opposing a plan that would have required them to spend $321 million to give workers 7 paid sick days, the main railroad companies raked in more than $7 billion in profits and paid out over $1.8 billion in dividends in a year where they and their lobbying groups have spent more than $13 million lobbying Congress, after railroad CEOs pocketed more than $200 million in compensation. The railroad industry delivered more than $3.3 million in campaign contributions to Congress in the 2021-2022 cycle, according to data collected by Open Secrets. Gee, I wonder why Congress is serving management and not the workers. I can't figure it out. Can't have anything to do with the millions of dollars they were given directly from management. The railroad workers, constrained by an outdated labor law, the Railway Labor Act, which severely limits their right to strike, have been outgunned this time by powerful corporate titans, bearing little difference from the railroad's robber baron founders. In August, a federal report prepared by the Biden administration stated that the railroads contend that their enormous profits do not reflect any contributions by labor. The railroads, meanwhile, have waged a full court press to have Congress implement an agreement negotiated by the Biden administration that only includes 1 day of paid sick leave after refusing to agree to any paid sick days in 3 years of talks with unions. Buffett's BNSF, a wholly owned subsidiary of his nearly $700 billion conglomerate Berkshire Hathaway, raked in $1.4 billion in the last quarter. For the 9 months ending on September 30th, the company's profits exploded to $4.5 billion, a $172 million increase from the prior year's haul. Buffett himself is worth an estimated $110 billion, according to Bloomberg. The press regularly fawns over the so-called Oracle of Omaha for his supposed frugality, even though he travels in a $6.7 million private jet. Another major rail operation, the Atlanta-based Norfolk Southern, reported $958 million in profits in the quarter ending September 30th. On October 25th, the company announced it was spending $290 million on shareholder dividends, boasting, quote, the company has paid a dividend on its common stock for 161 consecutive quarters since its formation in 1982. Norfolk Southern's dividend payouts have increased 15% year over year. Norfolk Southern CEO James Squires made more than $14 million in 2021, 140 times the median salary of a Norfolk Southern worker. Okay, so they go on to give more numbers here. And the bottom line is, look, these guys have done stock buybacks They're making a preposterous amount of profit. And again, all it would cost is 4 days of their recent profits in order to give these workers what they're asking for, which is 7 paid sick days. And they're not giving it. And Congress is owned by the companies. Congress is owned by management, by the people at the top. And so they are representing them. And they did the incredibly weaselly thing of splitting the bills, the 7 paid sick days, and forcing the contract the workers rejected onto them. So they voted to force the contract on them, and then they voted down the paid sick days. It passed the House, but it died in the Senate, as everybody knew was going to happen, as I told you was going to happen. And they broke their strike. They broke their strike. So now, you know the backstory of all that. Let's see. Shockingly, Jake Tapper is actually going to hold Mayor Pete a little bit accountable for this nonsense. Watch.
Just passed the Senate despite objections from members of both parties who wanted paid sick leave to be included. Why are you okay passing a deal that does not guarantee paid sick leave for these union workers?
Well, first of all, the importance of this deal is that a rail shutdown is being avoided. If that were to happen, we would have seen hundreds of thousands of American workers laid off, energy prices shooting up once refineries were unable to continue operating, issues getting chlorine to water treatment plants, auto industry factories shutting down within hours, if not days, of that happening. So what we've been able to avoid is a major blow to workers, farms, families across the country. Not everybody got what they wanted in this deal, but what was enacted is something that mirrors what was reached in the tentative agreement at the negotiating table between union leaders and railroad companies. What that includes is a 24% pay increase for railroad workers. They are essential workers who deserve to be paid well, on average $100,000 or so in pay. It includes adjustments to their health care, an additional day of paid personal leave. But again, not a perfect deal, and every side had to give in something in those negotiations to reach that deal. I think there's an ongoing conversation in this country about how to make sure that workers in this sector and in every sector get the support that they need. But right now, what you have is a deal that is improving pay and work conditions for American railroad workers and, crucially, avoiding a shutdown that would have been devastating to the American economy.
Without question, the shutdown would have been devastating to the American economy, and I think everybody out there is glad that it has been avoided. But the question is, these rail lines, they're making billions of dollars. Profits are up for all of them, quite a lot in some cases. You and I have paid sick leave. My crew has paid sick leave. Why don't these railway workers deserve paid sick leave?
Well, let me remind you, the position of our administration is that every American worker ought to have paid leave, whether you're a railroad worker, a journalist, a federal government employee, or whether you work at Burger King. We believe that every American worker, certainly every full-time American worker, ought to have paid leave.
Okay, so where's your action on that? Where's your action on that? Biden has the authority for all federal employees and federal contractors. He has the authority to just say, hey, you get 2 weeks paid vacation. But he chose not to do it. He didn't do it. He could have done it with these rail workers himself. He didn't do it. He chose not to do it. Beyond that, for all workers, you could propose a standalone bill. Do a full court press. Push the Republicans on it. Make them out to be the bad guy. Coalesce, round up all your Democratic votes. And he hasn't done that either. So it's one thing to say you believe in this. It's another thing to act like you believe in it and take concrete policy action, and they haven't done that.
The president has proposed that. The president has advanced that in proposed legislation, and so far it has been unable to get past what has been unified Senate Republican opposition. We are going to continue to press for that. Again, not just picking and choosing one sector over another, but based on the basic idea that every single American worker ought to have paid leave, just like you have in pretty much every country in the world.
Right,
but for now, right now, the tentative agreement that was reached at the bargaining table between union leaders and companies contains provisions like this pay raise and other improvements.
Right.
Okay. Union management having a strategy and wanting something is totally different from the workers themselves, because the majority of the workers rejected this deal. They rejected this deal. The majority of the workers said, we don't want this deal. So to bring up management, the unions want this. When he says the unions, he means the top of the unions. Union leadership. That's not indicative of what the workers want.
I get it, but saying that they ought to have paid sick leave and then getting in there and saying to the Warren Buffetts of the world, give these guys paid sick leave, or the White House is going to make you guys out to be the bad guys, and you're going to be the ones that are forced to blink after your reputations take a number of hits. That's a different matter. We've heard from multiple union workers who feel like the Biden administration has let them down. Gabe Christian.
So his argument is, why doesn't Biden go on the warpath and make these railroad robber barons public enemy number one? Say, look, the White House is going to target you. We are going to do ad campaigns against you. I'm going to give a speech from the White House and say, these fuckers are the problem. They're blocking a single week of paid time off. They're blocking that. They don't agree with that. They won't just give it. I'm going to force them to give it. Right? There's nothing. There's nothing. It was disarming across the board. And again, the reason is because the captains of industry are the ones who are paying the politicians, including the corporate Democrats.
A freight railroad brakeman who lives in Nevada, he told CNN, quote, "Here we have someone," meaning Biden, "who touted themselves as the most labor-friendly president for many decades, and he basically just betrayed us. There really is no difference between Democrats and Republicans anymore. They're just feeding corporate greed," unquote. What do you say to Gabe Christensen?
Can you fault that guy, given the position he's in? Given the fact that he was led to believe, oh, the Biden White House is going to fight for you. He's the most pro-labor president in U.S. history, which is comical, by the way. Of course he's not. But if you're that guy and you're told, oh, don't worry, they're going to come save the day, and then what happens? Nothing. They stab you in the back. They force you to take a deal that you said you didn't want to take. How can you blame him for believing that? I could sit here all day and list off decent things that the Biden administration has done, right? He's got a pro-labor NLRB, which has sort of led to the spark of union drives across the country, which is definitely a positive thing. We've talked about the executive order he signed raising the minimum wage for federal contractors and federal employees to $15 an hour. That's going to affect 300,000, 400,000 workers. You have the IRA, all these different provisions, which are positive provisions. You have the onshoring of jobs for the first time in my lifetime. I could list off all these good things that the Biden administration did when it comes to unions and workers. But here you have a union worker who is tired, been working insane hours, and the ask from him and his fellow workers is, let me get a week paid sick leave, and then you have Biden blocking it and forcing an agreement they don't want onto them. Doesn't matter how much shit you list. His personal life, his lived experience is that I'm being fucked right now, and I'm being fucked by every Republican because none of them are in favor of that's not fair. Maybe, 10% of them, 20% of them are in favor of 7 paid sick days. But it's the Republicans screwed them, and the Democrats are screwing them. How many Democrats voted the right way on this? It was like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Sherrod Brown, like a handful of others in the Senate, and then you had like Rashida Tlaib, Mark Pocan in the House. It wasn't that many. It wasn't that many that voted the right way. How is he supposed to feel about it? Because his life is materially being hurt by a guy who he's being told, oh, he's your savior.
Well, if you don't think there's any difference, you should look at the difference between this president who has advanced good-paying jobs, who has made sure the National Labor Relations Board is able to do its job, who has put in...
Again, this all rings so hollow. All of this is true. Yes, Biden is way better on workers' issues compared to Trump. That's not debatable. That's a fact. That is cold comfort to a guy who's being directly screwed by Biden's decision on this, because it's his life in particular that's being impacted. So you can't list off the other good things in a situation like this. You have to deliver on this issue, which again is not difficult. Just do an executive order saying every federal contractor has to get a week paid vacation time.
The first card-carrying union member to be labor secretary in a generation, who has upheld everything from Davis-Bacon wages to the kind of working conditions to make sure that unions can thrive, because he believes strongly in American unions, in organized labor, and is proud to be the most actively pro-union president in a generation. Again, that doesn't mean everybody got everything that they wanted, and we need to have a broader conversation about the labor models and the business practices of transportation companies in this country, and I think that conversation's going to continue and will reach a new phase as soon as the ink is dry on this bill.
By the way, even one of the things they could do, if Biden says, oh, I don't think I have the authority to do this on my own, which, by the way, he does have the authority to do this on his own, but let's say he doesn't. Here's something you could do. You could say, we're going to make an exception to the filibuster for this exact issue, and then we only need 51 votes to pass it. And guess what? You know how many votes it got in the Senate? 51 or 52. That's how many votes the 7 paid sick days got in the Senate. But it lost because Republicans filibustered it, so you need 60. But Biden could say, we're going to make an exception to the filibuster on this rule. The Senate can move to make an exception to the filibuster on this one. and then they could pass with 51 or 52, and that would be it. It'd be solved. But they don't want to do that. They actively don't want to. They are choosing not to do that because they are paid by the Warren Buffetts of the world. They're paid by the top of the railroad companies, not the workers.
But in the meantime, what you have is a tentative agreement that was reached by union leaders and company leaders at the bargaining table. And there simply were not votes, as we saw, not the votes in the Senate, for sure, to go in and change the terms of what was reached at that table. And this is not a situation where you can play around, where you can allow things to come to the brink. Even before the date of a potential shutdown, several days before that, you would have seen shipments begin to wind down, hazardous materials, potentially including chlorine for water treatment in this country, not able to get to where it needed to go.
So in other words, when the stakes are too high, which is exactly when you have your fucking leverage, you need to give away all your leverage. No, that's why they have leverage in that moment. That's why they are likely to get the 7 paid sick days, because it's like, hey, we actually make this shit work. If you can't give us 7 paid sick days, it ain't gonna fucking work. So now you have to do it. We have you by the balls. And Biden got involved to say, oh no, you don't have them by the balls. We're gonna side with management. Stab them in the back.
This is a situation where we couldn't allow brinksmanship to override the economic and national security of this country, but we are far from done.
Everything Pete is saying here is all the reason more they should have given the 7 paid sick days.
As an administration, doing our continued work to create good-paying jobs, to support union jobs, and again, continuing to press the case for paid leave for every single American in every single job in this country.
What does it mean to press the case if you're not willing to actually go to these billionaires and say, how on earth can you sleep at night not letting your railway workers have paid sick leave, which is just like that? I mean, that's not an extravagant benefit, paid sick leave. You get sick, you get to take a few days off. They don't have that. So I guess these lofty aspirations are one thing, but I didn't hear any language coming from the administration saying these rail companies need to get serious about offering basic benefits like paid sick leave. I didn't hear that. So I understand where Gabe Christensen is coming from.
I've never seen Jake Tapper do this good of a job on any issue. I think there's something about how basic the ask was that is sticking with him, that he can't get out of his mind. The ask is so simple, it's so straightforward, it's not too much to ask. They're not, you could, in theory, it wouldn't even be unreasonable to ask for 3 weeks paid time off, right? But it's 1 week paid time off, and they're not getting it. They're not getting any actual paid time off. They say there's 1 day, but you have to say 30 days in advance when you need some time off, right? So it's such a basic ask that for some reason this is sticking with Jake Tapper, and he's realizing, oh shit, this is insane. It's insane that they're not being given this, and they have to fight for it. This is ridiculous. And so he keeps going back. He's not letting Mayor Pete off the hook, which good. Look, I'll take it. I beat up on CNN all the time, but when a host does something good, I'm more than happy to give them credit. I believe in nuance. I believe in, take each issue on its own. Evaluate the evidence when it comes in front of you. And in this interview, he's doing a fantastic job. And credit to him for that. Because, again, I think this stuck with him. Just a week paid off, a paid week off. That's it. That's all they're asking for. And you get all this bullshit, highfalutin, flowery rhetoric from Mayor Pete about, in theory, ideally, what we'd want to do is reach this for all American workers. Okay, then where's your action to back that up? There is no action. What you did was just the opposite. You stabbed these workers in the back when they had the leverage to demand this.
Well, again, what this administration supported was what the union leaders and the company leaders agreed to.
No. Yes, the union leaders. The union leaders, not the workers. The leaders are different from the workers. A majority of the workers were against this. You are siding with management of the unions and of the railways over the workers. So he's trying to be, it's a little sleight of hand trick there. Oh, the unions agreed to this. No, not the workers. They were against it.
And did not insert changes into the agreement because that would have likely added time and complication to a process that would have taken us off the cliff economically. But let me be clear, very specific legislative proposals have come from this administration advancing paid leave. And if friends on the other side of the aisle would work with us, we could have had that, and we could have that in the future. And that's going to continue to be something we work on. In the meantime,
you can't say it's all the Republicans' fault when Biden had the opportunity. Biden could have stepped in and said, Congress is going to pass this bill, and it's going to have the 7 paid sick days in there. And he could have whipped the votes and gotten it passed. He didn't do that. He could have said, we're gonna pass the bill forcing the contract on them, but I'm separately going to sign an executive order that gives them the 7 paid sick days. He didn't do that either. He could have said, will remove the filibuster on this specific issue and pass the 7 days through the Senate with just 51 votes. He could have done that. He didn't do that either. There's so many things he could have done. He didn't do any of them. He forced the shitty deal on them that they didn't want. That's what he did. And now Mayor Pete is gaslighting all of America, lying about it. Look, credit to Jake Tapper. He did a decent job. It's the first time in a long time you've ever heard me say that. Maybe it'll be the last time I say it, knowing Jake Tapper's record. But what they were asking for was basic, and Democrats shit the bed on this one. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.